Very good. Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. We're so happy everybody could be here. Everything is working along nicely. And I just wanted to go over, I'm going to declare the Board of Selectmen in session, and the Finance Chair will do the same. Dwight will do that as well. A little bit of a timeline so people understand what's going to happen and the process will be moving forward. So we have obviously tonight's meeting where this is a first look for some on the budget. And Thursday night will be the public comment session. Tonight there will be no public comments. Thursday will be the public comment session, and then we can go through there. It's going to transmit, the budget will transmit to the Finance Committee on Monday of next week, for them to start their process and going through things and seeing what alterations they'd like to make. And then on Wednesday, the 2nd, February 2nd, FinCom will be meeting, a public meeting, and people can attend that as well if they'd like. And I'm not sure if Chairman Valentine will be entertaining comments. I'm sure he probably will, but just to make people aware of it. So with that said, thank you everybody for being here. And I will kick it over to you, Dwight, and then I'll take it right after that.
Yeah, thank you, Don. So today is Tuesday, January 25th at approximately 5:08 p.m. And I am now convening a meeting this evening of the Finance Committee in a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. And my understanding is that all the current members of the Finance Committee are present.
That's great. Thanks, Dwight. I appreciate that. Okay, with that, thank you. Let's dive right into this. I'm going to, I know we have a lengthy presentation. We're going to go through this. So Mitch, why don't you take it from here, unless any members of the, and Sarah's not unmuted. If you could unmute her, Ross.
Yes, Monty is also assisting as a host, so he'll be able to handle that as we go along too.
Perfect. Okay. Any comments from the Board of Selectmen or FinCom before we get started? Nope. Okay. Mitch, go ahead. Take it right over.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Good evening to members of the Selectmen and members of the Finance Committee, and to our department heads and members of the public this evening. So tonight is the presentation of the town administrator's initial recommended budget to the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share for that. And I will work my way through a PowerPoint, as we have done in previous years, to go over and hit the highlights. The department heads from the big five departments, the departments that are responsible for 85% plus of the budget, are here and available to answer any questions as we go throughout. There are several departments who will be asked to make some comments as we move along. Police, schools, IT, very specifically as we make our way through library, for any particular questions that do come up. But police and schools in particular have some commentary to share and provide some additional context to the requests. So the finance director and I have prepared, again, these initial recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. Let me walk you through what we have here. So process and timeline, let's jump to that slide. So we are here today at the Red Arrow. The Selectmen and the TA have developed guidelines. Departments were basically told, unless there was particular reason that we needed to go through and do an increase, that we were holding level funding, particularly because of the cost factors that are still unknown to us, which I will get into in a little bit: health insurance, state aid, and state assessments. Several of the larger departments had some cost increases that they will go over that were in essence unavoidable. So we've reviewed those and have provided commentary and recommendations to you throughout. We are here today at the Red Arrow, preparing to send forward and discuss this evening's recommendations with the Selectmen and the Finance Committee, and for the Selectmen to begin to use this document to consider your recommendations to move forward to the Finance Committee on Monday. Also, this year, new this year, is the inclusion of a budget public hearing. So on Thursday this week, there will be a budget public hearing. As the Selectman Chair indicated, an opportunity for the public to ask any questions and make comments on the budget before the Selectmen cast their final vote to transmit the document in whatever form they deem appropriate to the Finance Committee. That official transmittal will take place on Monday, January 31st. And so the public hearing is that pre-town meeting opportunity to offer some commentary as we go along. There will then move through the Finance Committee review process, which does start next week. And then we move forward pretty rapidly after that into annual town meeting on April 2nd at this time. So before I get into some of the assumptions and growth, I want to thank the department heads. Many of the department heads are on this call this evening, and I want to recognize all of them and thank them for their continued efforts throughout the year in being good fiscal stewards in our community. Certainly, in my office, we're responsible for making sure that general oversight is happening and things don't stray. But at the end of the day, it really is the department heads who are responsible for stewarding the funds that are in their care and custody. And I want to thank all of them, those who are here and those who are not, for their hard work on making that possible. Every one of them is very responsible and appropriate. And when they ask for something, it's for good cause. So we always give a benefit of the doubt for that. So again, just a thank you, and a special thank you to the finance director, Carrie Arnaud, who is really the charge on running SoftWrite, running our actual budget process, managing the actual input and control. Carrie handles the oversight of our levy analysis process and all of those requirements that allow us to provide this information to you in the necessary form. So a particular thank you to Carrie as we get going. And again, thanks to the Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Very appreciative for the continued rapport throughout this budget process and making sure that we're all working in the best interests of the town of Rockport. So with that, moving forward, growth and sustainability. Carrie will talk about some of our projected revenues and associated increases that you'll see. We continue to be conservative yet realistic in our revenue estimates as they go throughout. Certainly, COVID has made an impact in different areas on our revenues, but not all. You know, I think this past year, particularly, we were busy in town. So when you think about being busy in town and what that means, that translates into parking revenue, that translates into meals tax, that translates into other local sources of revenue in the community. So even though we have still been under the guise of COVID, we have still been able to be, I would say, cautious yet optimistic in some of our estimates as we have gone along. The budget assumptions, as you'll see, there are different adjustments through local receipts, which again, Carrie will provide a general overview. The tax levy is raised. We are recommending by the full 2.5%. General unrestricted local aid and Chapter 70 are based on the fiscal 22 current year numbers. The state has not yet issued the governor's budget, House 1 budget. That has not yet transmitted. So that puts us in a position where we are using guesstimates in some of these revenue and assessment areas because the state has not transmitted yet. A matter that I know I've discussed in public meetings with the Selectmen and Finance Committee and with Government and Bylaw, looking at the time periods for transmittal of the Selectmen's budget, currently January 31st, and having that moved out to February 15th so that we can be realistic in our numbers. So right now, assumptions that you'll see here, state aid, state assessments are based on current fiscal year, and we are holding approximately 8 to 8.5% increase for health insurance. We won't get that for another couple of weeks. So again, we build this budget as best we can with two significant factors still hanging in the balance, so to speak. So the budget that is being recommended and being presented for you is $38,524,757. Again, with the caveats listed, subject to state aid adjustments up and down. So state aid, we do expect that unrestricted general government aid will increase. There is some pretty significant debate on the commentary surrounding that right now. The Lieutenant Governor on Friday at the Mass Municipal Conference indicated that the UGA account is likely to increase by 2.7%, which is not necessarily in line with the very significant tax revenues that the Commonwealth has been reaping over the past few months. So I do expect that that will be the floor for the increase, but we'll have to see certainly with what the legislature produces and moves forward. Again, health insurance renewals, we'd certainly love it to be less than what it is. Health insurance renewals and even placeholders like this over 5% pose a number of challenges, certainly. It ties up funds that could be going to other important priorities in the budget. And for over 5%, it has an impact on the school department and the percentage that they are paying and carrying forward. So it does put us into a position where, again, there's a lot of variables that are still moving. The breakdown on the budget is, as you see here, general fund, $34,142,975, with general government being 19.1 million, education being 13.8, and debt service being 1.1 million. The enterprise funds, water enterprise is being proposed at 2.1 million, which reflects a 4.65% increase. Sewer enterprise is being proposed at a $2.1 million budget, reflecting a 0.01 decrease. We have the Assistant DPW Director, Aaron Shalufo, with us this evening, who can assist with any questions that come up relating to water and sewer as we go along. Aaron, the Director, Gary, and the Office and Business Manager, Lori Greenslade, spent a considerable amount of time going through the DPW budget, which I'll get to when we get to the 400s in the budget shortly. Carrie, can you talk us through the budgeted resources and revenues, please?
The revenues, Mitch had hit on the keyword, is basically conservative yet realistic. Last year we were heavily conservative, and this year, as the world has opened up, we've gotten a little bit more optimistic, and you would see examples of that, for instance, in the hotel and meals tax projections. I've increased those, just to give an example. Local receipts, we've increased some motor vehicle, and that's a result of vehicles that are being purchased, or like so many other things, as we know, cost of them is increasing. So the corresponding excise tax will increase.
So looking at some of the other sources, again, listed here, as we have done for a number of years, we use no free cash or one-time revenues for any of our recurring expenses. That is something that certainly poses a structural issue and not a road that we will be traveling down. Drawing from the three additional sources, you see the drawdown based on anticipated revenues for ambulance receipts, covering the funding for the ambulance department, the waterways fund drawdown covering funds for the harbor master and shellfish constable, and the parking fund covering funds for police, traffic and parking, and the parking clerk department. So moving right into specific departmental highlights. I'll go through as I normally do, and I'd ask that I'll stop for each page and solicit any questions from Finance Committee and Selectmen at the end of each page. And again, certainly if there are questions, we have the fleet of department heads who are here and present to assist us with answering and reviewing any materials. So the town moderator's budget, a whopping $237. There is no change from fiscal 22. Board of Selectmen budget, $493,288. That reflects a $40,000 approximately increase over FY22, which includes the following. We made a conversion of the contractual grant writer expense that we were holding in the selectmen's operating budget that has continued to go unfilled. That has posed a very significant challenge. We interviewed a number of candidates over the past year for that role. Selectman Campbell was kind enough to join myself and the finance director and the HR director on that. And it's a challenge. There are not necessarily a ton of candidates out there. And those who are can really pick what they want to do, where they go, and or have very specific areas that they write grants in or are comfortable writing grants in. So we stopped and took a look, I would say the last 2 or 3 months after we had some disappointing rounds with people who had expressed some interest and said, okay, how can we make this a more enticing role? And coupled with that, how can we fill an additional need of providing some additional high-level support in this office, in the selectman's office? A lot of different options do come up for that. The one that I've settled on and am recommending to the selectmen and will continue to recommend throughout the process is that we're converting the grant writer position from expense to labor. So transferring the $60,000 of expense into labor, adding $20,000 to that to create one full-time equivalent grants and special projects manager position. I think the selectmen are well aware of this, and others may be as well, that there is high demand for what happens with the 2 full-time equivalents that operate the Board of Selectmen's office. And despite best efforts on trying to keep up and keep everybody happy and keep all the balls in the air, it is sometimes like drinking out of a fire hose that's on full bore. So we always naturally have to prioritize, but certainly we need to look at capacity, recognizing that when we're always going 1,000 miles an hour, we need to stop and look at, what kind of capacity we have. So to that end, a small portion of this new recommended role will provide special project support to this office. So things that, and looking at the faces on the screens, a lot of you have pending things with this office, and we move through them as quickly as we can. But having, again, a partial set of hands to assist with some of those larger projects is quite frankly really important and critical for us to continue to be successful and provide a high level of service. So not adding any kind of additional rollback or full-time support back. We're basically saying we recognize we need the grants. We recognize we need some additional high-level support. And I believe that this position does offer that. So the majority of the $40,000 increase goes towards a concept that has come up in the last couple of months. And it's the increase of meeting support clerk coverage for boards and committees. We have enhanced that line greatly. So this current fiscal year and for a number of years, I would say probably a handful of boards and committees have had meeting support clerks assigned to them. Someone to take the minutes, process the minutes, get them posted, and provide necessary assistance. The intention with the inclusion of an additional $30,000 approximately to this line, our goal is to provide meeting support clerks to nearly all of the boards and committees throughout town. There are some who may not feel they need it, and we'll address that on a case-by-case basis. But one of our goals certainly is to standardize the minutes process, standardize the posting process associated with that, making sure that minutes that are being taken are in compliance with Mass General Law and addressing all of the particular areas that need to be addressed. And quite frankly, it's a lot to ask of our citizen volunteers to be a part of the committee and to have to go through and take the notes. In most cases, if you're taking the minutes for that meeting, you're not going to be a real active participant in that particular case. That's a challenge. We want to be able to work to address that particular issue. And we believe that this is a very significant step forward in that process to be able to do so. Again, it's new, so I expect there'll be some hiccups and we'll have to see what works. But the intention is, should this be approved, this additional support clerk coverage We will post and seek to hire several additional support clerks on a, again, part-time basis, nothing full-time, basically covering these evening meetings. Each person would get assigned a handful of meetings, should be boards or committees or commissions, and be responsible for attending those and curating their minutes and going through that posting process with them. Again, trying to take the strain off of the volunteers having to go through that process, but making sure that we're still meeting all of our compliance requirements. And then 1, 2, 4 selectmen committees, a couple of the boards and committees, historical and town art fall under that. There is no change to those. Any questions on 114, 122, or 124?
Hey, thank you, Mitch. And very quickly, so you're proposing, and we've talked about this, the grant and special project person to be approximately $80,000 per year. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oops, sorry. Yes, the intention is that that would be approximately $80,000.
And with your experience interviewing people, are you confident that we'll be able to get someone for that price?
So as
Oh, that's
confident as
salary.
as confident as you can be in this particular job market.
Yeah.
I think everybody on the screen will tell you there's no guarantees right now.
Right.
I'm as confident as I could be.
Right. And last thing about the hiring someone to take minutes, I think that's a great move. We ask a lot of these volunteer citizens that are appointed to these committees, and to ask someone to take the notes, I think is a little over and beyond. And that particular, and you're 100% right, that particular person would not be very active in the meeting if he or she is taking the minutes. So I fully support that. Thank you.
Mitch, on the position that we're talking about, is there, this is going to remove you from some of these meetings, is that correct? That it'll free you up, is that correct, or is this other?
So the special projects and grants is not necessarily, is not associated.
No,
necessarily with
not
committees.
special, I'm talking about the
Clerk.
minute taker and clerk.
Oh, no. So this is not, I don't typically function in that role. So this is adding more folks on who work with us, like Eileen Hines does for the selectmen and for the finance committee. It's adding more of that position in, as Kelsey does for conservation and Lynn does for CPC. It's more of those roles.
Can this person be utilized to host meetings, which would free up some of your time?
So they may be able to take on some hosting duties. It's going to depend on what the committees look like. Frankly, it's going to depend on if we're doing Zoom meetings come July 1st. I think
Right.
that's a big question. But I host the meetings that I need to be at. We have a good group of meeting hosts, and they cover the vast majority. So I cover the ones that I personally need to be at.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions, Selectmen or FinCom? Okay. 133 Finance Committee, no change from last year. Town Accountant, 263,896, which reflects a $31,000 decrease over the current year. The Finance Director, who oversees accounting and some of our other financial functions, reviewed our contracted services line in that particular case and felt comfortable making a reduction based on actual costs. So we are able to hopefully realize a savings on contracted services in that case. And then 141 Board of Assessors, no change from the current year. Any questions on this page?
Nope.
Treasurer Collector and Legal, 147 and 151. Neither one of those have any changes, level funded from the current fiscal year. Any questions on either one of those lines? Human Resources, 153, no change from the current fiscal year. 154 IS&T, So this reflects a few items. It reflects $155,000 increase over FY22. It includes a new 0.5 equivalent support specialist. So in approximately 19-hour a week, non-benefited support specialist to assist the current staff. So we currently have 4 full-time equivalents covering all of general government, all of the schools, library, and police. So IS&T is truly town-wide, and the current team has done an excellent job maintaining everything, covering the high-level issues with our servers and our software, right down to the day-to-day tech support that comes in and helping people change printer cartridges and fix login issues and things of that nature. Certainly, our demand on technology has not gone down. In fact, it has increased significantly. So the intention here is that this will provide some frontline help desk support to the IS&T staff to allow the two specialists, our networks manager and our user services specialist, to focus more on the areas that they really need to, and areas that right now they're not able to get to because they're covering a lot of the help desk functions. So the intention is that will enhance the level of service that IS&T is able to provide. They are now operating in a 24/7 environment with the inclusion of our police department. And several of the increases are really more accurate reflections of the ongoing costs associated with operating the IS&T department. There are new ongoing costs for a lot of the software programs that are taking place from the library, from the schools, from general government. The inclusion of additional website support, the inclusion of the See-Click Fix program that's being developed and prepared to be rolled out. Other additional add-ons to services added on to our website to better respond to commentary that we've gotten from employees and from citizens. One of the additional programs that we're working on as part of the website overhaul is a program called Civic Clerk, which is specifically geared towards meetings, postings, minutes, agendas, and making sure that those are accessible and available in an appropriate way. Those all come with ongoing costs. So the budget that IS&T has developed and that we have scrutinized more accurately and appropriately reflects what the costs are for operating our technology services in town. And then tax possessed land, there is no change. Monty, do you want to offer some commentary on the increase associated with IS&T?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it really is just the increased demand of software, specifically about, we're beyond having a functional phone system, and people are using technology more and more. So we're trying to find operational efficiencies in given departments, whether that be with DPW and how to report a pothole type of thing, or how to do payroll. These are all things we're exploring. And then as well, we're getting hit on the other side with the increased costs of hardware. Everything costs more, everything takes longer. We're having to have more stuff in the building instead of being able to rely on, a 48-hour turnaround to get a laptop. So that's really what it is. We're also spreading a little thinner in relationship to now being in charge of things like access control systems. The camera systems continue to expand. So there's just more for us to manage, and the half-time person would really make a big difference.
Questions from FinCom and Selectmen?
Quick question, Mitch and Monty. Does this include, let me back up for a second. At an earlier time,
Make a great choice today.
At an earlier time, there was some discussion about revision of the town website. Is that part of this budget component?
So that's part of the ongoing costs associated with it. The
Yeah.
behind the scenes development process has started. So there are additional service costs associated with the website and these different add-ons that are tied into the website.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what are the
question.
other? Yep.
Mitch, this is Sal, and Monty, thank you. we hear in the news headlines about ransomware attacks, and they're getting more prevalent. Does this budget reflect anything that's needed to protect the town from those attacks?
So Monty, do you want to talk about just very, very high level on some of the additional pieces that you incorporated this year to address some of those issues?
Sure. We have we've brought in an outside state rep to help us with making sure that we're doing the right things for cybersecurity. We've elevated a few pieces of software to be able to actively monitor if anybody has gotten into the system and how to shut things down. We have contracted with a couple of companies to ensure that we are monitoring even if we're being attacked from the outside and they haven't made it into the building. This is something that's very high on a daily basis. It's on our mind all the time. It happened to a vendor of ours yesterday. So it's something we're constantly training and making sure that the services that we have are both supported, current, modern, any way you want to phrase that, because that's a day-to-day part of our lives now.
And one of the other additions that Monty and his team put in, we're in the process of implementing, and then during our insurance renewal, it became obligatory, is multi-factor authentication. So that is a requirement now for all of general government and all of the educational sector that you must utilize multi-factor authentication to get into the networks.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Chief, you had a question?
Not so much a question. I just wanted to throw the IT department some props. Over the last year, they've taken over the police department. The experience has been extremely positive. They're very responsive. The IT infrastructure of the police department is no easy task. It's a heavy lift. We're 24/7. We've got a lot of security requirements, as everybody probably knows. And Monty and his folks have been outstanding. So the transition over to an in-house IT model of managing the IT at the police department has gone extremely well. And I just want to express my appreciation to Monty and his crew for stepping up and helping us out.
Thank you.
Cindy, did you want to?
I wanted to reiterate what actually the chief just said, and commend Monty and his team. They have been absolutely phenomenal. We've made the change over the past fiscal year from paying for a private organization to provide IS&T services to using our own IS&T services, and they have met and exceeded our expectations and provided an enormous cost savings for the library in the town. And I commend them all for their hard work.
Can't hear him yet.
Go. Sorry, I have a kill switch on my mic as I have a coffee throughout this. My apologies. Any other questions from FinCom and Selectmen? Okay. Moving on to 161, 164, and 171. Town Clerk, Elections and Registration and Conservation Commission. No change, level funded for general services for those departments. Any questions on this page? Millbrook Meadow Committee, Rights of Way Committee, Beautification Committee, all level funded, no change from the current fiscal year. Any questions? Okay. 175 Planning Board reflects a slight increase over fiscal 22, approximately $800. 176 Zoning Board of Appeals and 181 Community Development, no changes from the current fiscal year. Any questions on this page? .210 Police Department. Police reflects an approximate $148,000 increase over the current fiscal year and also includes funding for one full-time equivalent civilian dispatcher. Chief Horvath has some information to provide and share with you as it relates to new impacts and expectations associated with the police department through the police reform process. He's supported here by Lieutenant Marino as well. Chief, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everybody. One of our continuing goals at the police department is to hire and retain the best police officers and support staff that we possibly can. We do so in order to provide everybody in town and our visitors the most professional service we can while cultivating future leaders within our department at all levels to keep everyone safe and assist in maintaining a great quality of life that we enjoy in our town. On December 31st, 2020, Governor Baker signed an act relative to justice, equity, and accountability in law enforcement in the Commonwealth. This is also known as criminal justice reform or police reform. This reform created a Massachusetts Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, also known as the Post Commission, as well as a mandatory certification process, which the Commonwealth did not have up until this point, when many other states have a certification process for police officers. So that's a really great thing for us. It increases accountability and transparency in law enforcement, but it also places increased restrictions and mandates on the hiring of part-time reserve police officers as well as full-time police officers. During this past calendar year, 2021, we were met with the challenges of the criminal justice reform mandates that were implemented. Most impactful on our police department and the related department budget is the fact that we can no longer hire candidates for the position of reserve police officer that are not already currently trained as reserve police officers, identified as a law enforcement officer. So there's specific positions designated by the state that they have to be performing those functions of. And they need to be working currently in a patrol capacity, at the current time in order for us to hire them as a reserve officer, bring them into our community, train them, and then allow them to take calls for service. This is a very large change to what we're used to in town. And the reason behind all this is really the Commonwealth wants everyone trained to the same level. With that being said, all new hire reserve police officers will need to attend a full-time recruit officer police academy, which negates the cost savings benefit and operational effectiveness and efficiency offered by the reserve officer position that we've enjoyed for many, many years, as well as many other departments have. This legislative change to the hiring and training process significantly impacts our police department's ability to hire officers and increases the department's budget in order to cover patrol shifts with minimum staffing. Due to the dwindling limited pool of certified working reserve police officers and the elimination of the Reserve Police Officer Academy, we will no longer be able to utilize reserve police officers at a cost savings to the town as we have in the past. We may be able to do it, but it'd be on a very, very limited basis. That's the bad news. The good news is you have a resilient police department, although currently small in number and and rebuilding. We see these challenges as opportunities and ask for your continued support. Your officers and dispatchers that continue to serve you each day do so because they have a passion for serving and are firm in their resolve to bring back the professionalism in policing and public safety that has been called into question in large part across our country over the last few years. The collective bargaining agreement with the Police Officers and Police Supervisors Union was ratified in October of 2021. Thank you to Mitch and the Board of Selectmen for the support with that contract. That contract was a good one for all parties and affords our personnel salary and benefits commensurate with the positions they hold and the service they provide during these very challenging times to be a police officer. We thank you for all of you for your appreciation and support that you show us throughout the year. So I'd like to just provide a brief summarized breakdown of the budgets for the police department and as you see, traffic and parking, lifeguards, and emergency management. And then I'll pause briefly if there's any questions. So with regards to the police department, the number that you see, 148,396, that is an increase due in large part to contractual obligations within our department. Within our labor account, we realized a small savings in overtime, as well as the previously mentioned permanent, intermittent, or reserve officer positions. We also had a decrease in our expense account of just over $12,000. So that number 148,396 is really for contractual obligations related to salaries and benefits for our officers in the police department. We are looking to fill a third civilian dispatcher position within our department at a cost savings. The civilian dispatcher position is a very important one. That is the person that answers your call, whether it's a 911 call or a routine call. And obviously, they're a part of our public safety family here that serves all our public safety departments in the town of Rockport. At this time, that covers my summary for the police department. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Paul?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Chief, for that detailed explanation of how things are going at the department in terms of financial. How are we shorthanded currently?
We are. So currently, we're going with an 11 and 3 model, 11 officers, 3 dispatchers. Then we have our sergeants, lieutenant, myself. Currently, we have 9 police officers. Of those 9 officers, 2 are actually in the academy. So we have 7 officers, and one of those 7 is currently our school resource officer, who is performing double duty, if you will. He's spending time at the school. He's also spending some time on the road supporting officers on patrol. We're looking to hire. We've had some folks before you recently over the last month or so. We have some people going through the background process now that we're very optimistic we'd like to hire and bring in. We think they'd be good fits for our department. And we're definitely in a rebuilding phase. I've talked with police chiefs both regionally as well as locally, and we're all chasing the small pool of candidates, and we're all feeling the same crunch and pain of not only the police reform, which has a lot of benefits, but just more of a nationwide trend of people just not being interested in taking certain positions. And unfortunately, policing at this current time is not necessarily a popular one. So,
Right. And one last question, Mr. Chairman. Chief, this new certification for police officers, is that going to hinder us getting candidates up here, or is what's your thoughts? Just very quickly, I know we got a lot to do.
sure. So the certificate, not so much the certification, it's more of attracting the right candidates that want to stay long-term, want to serve the town of Rockport. Our town offers a lot of huge benefits, very welcoming community. But we have a lot of competition. There's a lot of departments out there that are looking to chase the same small pool of candidates until policing comes back on the upswing. And I do believe, I'm an optimistic person. I do believe this will be a sought after position again. It's just right now, it isn't necessarily one of those positions. So great question.
And sometimes our geographical location can hinder us, unfortunately, being out here. But anyways, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief, I'm going to just make a quick comment. This police reform, as you said, does have some benefits. However, I think when the legislature took more of a shotgun approach rather than a laser approach to this whole thing, it really put towns like Rockport in a very difficult position. I know we're not the only town. I deal with law enforcement every day in my job. And I know I'm hearing the same things. And I wish that things could have been different, because reserve officers played a very important role in this stuff. And now we don't have the ability to hire reserve officers, train them, let them get their feet wet, give them a taste of what the profession really is, to let them make a career decision. And I know, at least from our department, that your oversight and your FTOs who are there take great pains in really training these folks to make sure that they're up to the highest standards. So I know that's a bit rhetorical in nature, but it needs to be said. And I know you have some challenges, and you have our support.
Thank you very much, Selectman Campbell. You hit the nail right on the head. It was a proving ground for us. We'd bring in reserves. They'd find out if the job was for them. We'd find out if they were a good fit for our community. Some worked out, some didn't, but nonetheless, they certainly served the purpose and a role. We were able to utilize them at a cost savings for a period of time until they went full time. And unfortunately, that's going to go away in large part. But you know what? We like a challenge, and we're gonna be up to this one as well.
If anybody can do it, Chief, I know you can. Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly don't do it alone. And Lieutenant Marino's on this call, as Mitch had mentioned earlier. So I owe a lot to him. I owe a lot to our supervisors, our officers, our dispatchers, and once again, this is a team approach. But our community as well is extremely supportive, and I can't thank them enough, because they express their appreciation a lot more than maybe some individuals in other cities or towns do for their forces. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. No problem.
LT, since you're on the call, is anything you want to add into what the chief said?
No, I'm with the chief echoes is very, very true, very important right now. We're in a critical, phase, I think the department's history. So we appreciate all the support that we get from all of you, in particular the board. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from Selectmen or FinCom for police?
Mitch, I have a quick question.
Yep.
Chief, did the state legislation take into account the impact on town budgets of the requirements with respect to the training of officers, and has there been some allocation to offset the increase in costs?
Dwight, that's a great question. So do I think they did? I believe they did. I don't want to speak for anyone specifically at the legislature. I think the considerations were given more for the areas of training monies, because the state has rolled out a lot of training and will continue to do so. I think where the process falls short is actually providing municipalities some support, budgetary support outside of training. So in other words, the things that we're talking about right now, contractual costs related to salary and benefits, there's no support there. So for training, yes. For some of the things that are in front of you now, not so much.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for police? Okay, Chief, traffic and parking.
Sure, traffic and parking reflects a $14,524 decrease. That's a little bit of money coming from based on the reduction of the year with regards to the pay for parking season, which once again for everybody's April 15th through November 15th each year. So there's a little bit of money that we were able to reduce for meter attendants, which are parking control officers, as well as some purchase of services for the phone app, as well as some of the maintenance items pertaining to the system. So Sergeant Mahoney is our traffic and parking program supervisor. He's done a very nice job settling into that role with an eye towards making sure that we're streamlining our operations there. So yeah, that's a decrease. Lifeguards is actually going to be a little bit less probably than that number. If we go flat funded, we'll be a little bit less. If we go with what's there, that is if we staff our 4 beaches with our 8 guards during the course of the season every day. We have not been able to do that. That's another position, once again, that takes it takes a lot of recruiting, and Sergeant Bill Boudreau is in charge of that. He does an excellent job. So we're hoping to staff as many of the beaches as we can and keep our beaches safe. So.
Any questions for the chief on 210, 212, 215? Sarah?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chief. This is so incredibly helpful. Just on the lifeguards, which is like a pet project of mine. And I've learned from my work at the yacht club too, that last year the YMCA didn't do certification classes. So hopefully that they'll start doing in-person trainings and classes again, because last year it was just hard. It was hard to find trained lifeguards anywhere. So.
A great point. We actually had a local resident host a course at their home because they had a nice pool, and we took advantage of that. We had some lifeguards go through that program. Did very well, did a great job for us for the season. We're trying to retain some of the ones we had last year, as well as recruit new ones. So if anybody has a young adult or a high school age student, we'd love to bring them on. Looks great on a resume.
Great,
thanks. Thanks, Chief. You're probably going to get my daughter, so that's a good thing. She's looking forward to it, and a few of her friends. But how do we look at this from the standpoint of going at this before the season starts to maybe facilitate a class, maybe get somebody in to do that class, advertise it at the school, get these positions potentially filled before the season even starts. So we have this ready to go. Is that something that could be considered?
I think, yeah, we've talked about that in years past. I don't know. I'm going to try to say this as politically correct as I can. A lot of people don't like to look too forward into the future with regards to commitments. So when we've tried to lock in people, for lack of a better term, we've been met with people being non-committal because it's too far out into the future. So with that being said, we're gonna, Sergeant Boudreau, as soon as the snow starts melting, he starts thinking lifeguards. So we're on it. If I'm always open to new ideas as far as marketing or outreach goes. But our experience has been people like to make decisions, employment decisions, particularly some of our younger folks, when they know they don't have something else going on. Sometimes folks, some of these younger adults have, they're waiting on things such as, college commitments, or they're doing, job shadowing and so forth. So that has a big impact, and they don't want to commit unless they can actually carry through with that commitment, which I understand.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for this page? Okay. Next, 220 fire, 25 forest fire, 31 ambulance. No change on the operations end for fire or forest fire. I will circle back on the capital side for fire and address some of the items that the Board of Fire Engineers and Chief Keating has brought forward regarding employee safety, which we'll address in the capital portion of the meeting. Ambulance reflects a modest increase associated with fuel costs for their operating budget of approximately $3,100. Again, funds generated from our ambulance billings and ALS agreements is the primary funding source for this department. As Selectmen will recall, you've approved a number of rate increases over the past year or two to keep us current and in a competitive place with the rates in the region. So we continue to try to draw in funds at that point. And we have I think we're probably been with this billing agency a year or two now, Carrie, is that correct? And they are much better than the previous agency we have. We are consistently bringing in more than we're putting out on our rates, which is excellent. And for those that are not paying or there are payment issues, we do have appropriate processes now to follow that up, to do collections if necessary, and to write off those where it is truly uncollectible. Any questions on this page?
Nope.
Okay. Inspectional services and animal inspector, 241 and 249, no changes for those for the current fiscal year, level funded. And then 291 emergency management, reflecting a $5,000 increase relating to funding for training and development. Chief Horvath is also our emergency management director, as you know. Chief, can you address that, please? Sure. So in the emergency management budget, there currently wasn't any money allocated for training. So in discussions with Mitch over the last few months, we recognize that we're just getting more and more of these environmental type of emergencies, snowstorms, things where we can potentially be impacted as a community for days or, God forbid, weeks. So with that being said, we agree that it's important to start getting some of our full-time employees trained in town for roles that are non-traditional, but may be called upon during some of these protracted incidents, if you will. So it's a modest request for training, and if approved, we develop a plan to get some folks trained. Some of it can start free online, which is what we're going to roll out, over the course of this next year. But if we're going to get some money towards training, I'd like to do some tabletop exercises and so forth. Any questions on this page? Okay. 292, 293, and 295, animal control and parking clerk, no change associated with those. And harbor master and shellfish constable, a minor increase, $500 relating to fuel costs. So the 200s encompass our public safety departments, and I want to pause for a moment and offer thanks to those departments: police, fire, ambulance, forest fire, harbor master, shellfish, animal control. We truly are all, and I know all of you know this, but we are really very fortunate to have such a dedicated group of our full-time and our call staff in all of those departments. They always make it work. They always rise to the occasion. And I want to be sure that we take a moment now, especially as we have continued, on year 2 of dealing with the pandemic. All of those departments, our public safety departments, continue to be on the front line of that. We deal with it in our strategy ways, our policy and procedure ways. All of those departments are actually showing up for those calls. So I want to recognize all of them and thank all of them, again, through their department heads that are here to please convey to your staff. Thank you for your continued efforts, especially as we deal with the pandemic. It is greatly appreciated for all of the public safety folks here. Switching to the next set, 297 Harbor Advisory, no change from that. And then that brings us to Department 300 and the schools. Superintendent Lebo. Rob, do you want me to stop my screen share and do you want to use your?
Yeah, great if you can. So I believe the Select Board and Finance Committee were sent this presentation. It's a mirror image sort of in terms of the structure. I'm not going to go into tremendous detail on it tonight, but we'll certainly ask any questions, and folks might want to study it a little bit before the next meeting, as well as a FinCom meeting next week. But this sort of shot in the beginning sums up what we've been dealing with for almost 2 years now, which are the effects of the pandemic. It shows a quick shot of pool testing, the percentage we have for participation, which is wonderful, and the number of tests that occurred in one slice of time last spring. So that has really dominated a lot of what's gone on in the schools. These shots I show every year, they explain to someone who's looking at school budgets for the first time how school budgets are created, what their funding is, and probably the most important one is the town school model that we've operated with for a number of years now. And that states that the school will make every attempt to try to hold its budget to less than 3%, and the town will attempt to offer 2.3% in additional base funds if health insurance does not exceed 5%. And if, as we experienced last year, the school reserves, which are made of school choice and circuit breaker funds, if that ever falls below $400,000, that's considered to be a trigger for an override. And then hopefully the budget is structurally set up and conditions happen that you don't have to come back and ask the taxpayers for an override for an extended period of time. That last override was over about a 10-year period of time. The model is created to try to establish a 5-year period of time. And since this is sort of my first opportunity, I do want to thank the voters of Rockport for supporting the override. I think you invested in a very good cause, and we will be good stewards of your support. This shows how the budgets are built in terms of the town contribution, school reserves, user fees, and grants. That's probably a little more technical than we want to go through tonight, I believe, unless there's any questions on that slide. The other portions of the budget, there are a capital improvement part that everybody as a town department has to put their large purchase increases to, and Mitch will talk about that specifically later on. We were fortunate to get a SPED reserve established a number of years back that handles the mercurial ups and downs of a very hard to predict cost center. And then there are donations and volunteers. There's Chapter 70 aid that goes into the school budget, into the town budget, and there are Medicaid reimbursements that also go into the town budget. And this year's budget build, I have a quick overview slide. There's not dramatic changes in this year's budget. The FY23 operating budget is proposed to be $15,456,356, which is a 3% increase. That meets the town school model. It's an additional amount of $450,173. The town's base contribution, if health insurance was less than 5%, would be a 2.3% increase, which would take the town base contribution to $13,612,540, which would be an increase of $306,049. Now at about 4 o'clock this afternoon, the finance director sent us a calculation that relates to the town school model that says for right now that the health insurance increase is slated at 8.5% and not at 5% or less. So when you go through the calculation, instead of a 306,049 increase in the base, our share of paying the amount above 5% for our health insurance costs would reduce our base contribution from the town by $117,992, which would take the base down to $188,057 and not an increase of $306,049. So that number would be adjusted down if the 8.5% health insurance, which, as I think Mitch said, in a couple of weeks, we should know that number. Hopefully it's less, and we really hope it's not a higher amount. The major budget challenges and highlights. There are negotiated salary scale changes of 2.5% for all of our union contracts. There are no staffing or programmatic additions. There are no major changes in the expense lines. The real driver in this year's budget, and it's been typical of the last few years, is in the special education cost center. Special education tuition increase is slated at $335,251, and that's based on actual kids in their placements with the projected increase for those placements. And the transportation increases are slated at $97,064 for a total special education cost center increase of $447,101. So if you recall, the entire budget is up $450,173, and the special education, those two lines basically consume the entire 3% increase in the overall operating budget of the schools. The special ed reserve transfer request this year, which we can talk about later on, is a request for $203,294 to be transferred to the school budget. And then the CIPC request, those can be talked about later on. And then the actual budget detail itself is set up the same for all the cost centers. This first one is the central office. So it shows the labor lines and the expense lines. And it shows this year's budget versus what the budget is for FY23 and what the difference is. So you can see the blue are the increases, the red are the decreases. As I stated before, the expense lines are either level funded or actually reduced to adjust for different circumstances. And labor reflects a 2.5% increase for the actual people in those positions. Sometimes you'll see a negative, like here, this is the superintendent secretary. That's Ingrid Keating's position, and she is retiring after a long career, and she gets longevity pay. So that's not going to be there. So we're not reducing the salary for that individual. It just reflects an individual leaving and then a new person coming into that position. The entire cost center for the central office is an increase of less than 1%, 0.8%. And then if you go to all of the different tabs, the first tab after the central office is the elementary school. It's set up the same way: labor, teaching staff, expenses. Bottom line is the elementary school is down approximately 1% versus this year's requests. and you can see where those are reflected. And I would answer any questions if there are about the detail, but I tend to get overly verbal sometimes and get down to minutia. So I can certainly go back to any of these tabs, but the entire cost center down 1%. The middle school budget, same setup, same structure, labor expenses, overall cost center for the middle school down basically 1%, 0.89%. High school, same structure, same setup. It does have an increase of 1.95% versus what the budgeted amounts were this year. Special education, as I mentioned before, there's labor. The big driver is right here. Tuition, transportation, increase 180,000, increase 152,000, increase 97,000. Total increase in tuition, total increase in transportation. Cost center for special education is up 9%, $447,000 of the $450,000 that's available by the budget model. Operation and maintenance, same kind of setup. Labor expenses, operation and maintenance is down 11,500, down 1.23%. Athletics is a revolving type account. It has its own reserve from user fees. The entire cost center for athletics, that's not the entire cost of athletics, because the user fees help sustain and fund the program, but the entire cost center is up less than 1%. Transportation up 1.49%. And again, labor expenses. What we always tend to look at a little bit is this rather complicated sheet. Might be the last time you ever look at it, so might want to study a little bit. It shows this year's present budget, next year's proposed budget, what those lines are for increase and decrease, the 3% and the $450,000 requested increase. And then remember, the operating budget is 15,456,255. This year it was 15,006, and the town contribution was going to be, before the override, 12,529,184. With the override of 777,336, the town contribution to that budget was 13,306,000. That gap between the operating budget and the town contribution is closed by transportation fees, athletic fees, federal grants, circuit breaker transfer, school choice reserve transfer, and then an additional amount that is taken from our reserves to balance the budget so that that number and that number are therefore rectified. And then it shows a predictive model for where you're going this year at the end of the year. These were our reserves to start the year: 568 in school choice, 282 in circuit breaker, for a total of 851,363. This is incoming revenue for school choice, incoming revenue for circuit breaker, and this right now at this very moment in time, which does not have all the variables played out for a school year, says that our reserve at the end of this year will have $1,356,160 in it. And that's a guesstimate. That is driven basically by the fact that the override refueled the reserves, and now the school has funds to carry it through the way the model was set up, at least for a 5-year period of time before you are then coming back to the taxpayers. Then transfer that to this year's budget, run that down through what we would have to take, and it would be a reserve actually growing, believe it or not, to 1.7 million predicted at the end of next year. And then I think the holy grail of this entire budget model is a predictive model that says that if you went forward and you had a school budget increase of 3%, a town base contribution of 2.3%, assuming health insurance was not over 5%. You had the same types of variables for choice, same types of expenditures not going over 3%. Then your reserve at the end of a subsequent year, the year after next, would be down to 1.6 million. And then the next year, down to 1.4 million. Next year, down to 1 million. Next year, down to 466. And then at that point, one would have to ask for another override if they were keeping a 3% budget and a 2.3% town base. So what that model does here is predict the 5-year period of time before an override would have to be requested again. And then one would have to establish what size that would be. And then if it wasn't passed, you have yourself a nearly $300,000 deficit. And when you go to set up your budget, the only way you're ever going to start to meet that is reduction in personnel and programs. And that really sets up how the entire model is predictive of what an override can do for the school budget in terms of carrying it forward. And then there's a tab on the SPED reserve, which if you went back to the SPED budget, those blue lines, those are the lines that play into the SPED reserve. We budget an amount, and if we underspend it, then we're asked to transfer into the reserve. If we overspend those lines, then we ask a request to come out of the reserve. And this exercise here shows those same lines, what we budgeted for, what's anticipated. And here's the big driver for why we're requesting 203, 294 is that our out of district placements were budgeted at 1.4 million.
Recording in progress.
And they are anticipated to be at 1.6 million. Now that's not shadow budgeting where one underfunds that line and then says, oh, look at that. It's really 1.6 million. That's a result in some cases of one child having to be placed in a different program in the beginning of a school year. And that could be a $200,000 shift in their tuitions from the Rockport school budget. And there are about 25 students who are in out of district placements. Same thing for transportation. This is what we budgeted for. This is what it's anticipated. Kids who are in out of district placements have different transportation needs if they change a program, if they need a nurse in their transportation vehicle, if the vehicle has to go further, or if a one-on-one individual has to be in that transportation vehicle to be able to support the child in that transportation to their new program. We don't necessarily know all that when we build that budget. So these are real predicted numbers, which result in a overdraft of 175 in tuition, overdraft of 41 in transportation, savings of 12,000 in outside evaluations, equal in one-on-one, and a savings of 2,000 in tutoring services. Bottom line is, if we are to even things out for those lines, the way the SPED reserve was set up, we would need a transfer of $203,294 into, and I believe they're transferred usually into the big out of district tuition line. I think that is every part of the school budget except those CIP requests that can wait for later. And since I went through that probably faster than I ever have, I'm more than willing to answer any questions that anybody has with regard to anything that's on that screen, or would anticipate and welcome the 2 or 3 days of study until Thursday, and would be glad to answer those at that point as well. I do think it's important to note that our contracted union salary settlements, I believe, were very reasonable at 2.5%. If you look at what COLA is right now, my Social Security just adjusted by 5.9% on this particular check. I believe it's the 2022 COLA adjustment is 5.9%. And our teachers and support staff, before the override request last year, a year before we were anticipating needing the override, and it was close, pandemic hit. We went to our union and said, can you help us? They were operating in contractual agreements of 1.45% for 3 straight years. In many cases, especially for support staff, not even covering the cost of their health insurance increase. And we asked them to help us try to avoid the override. And they gave back large sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They forewent, it's not even a word, forewent, but they foregoed, neither of those words are the proper selection of terminology, but they did without, like a coach who was having a coaching salary of $5,000 for an entire season. They took 75% of that amount and still did the entire season. So this makes sense. They took one for the team, as did our teachers, and they got that back, but they never recouped what they lost. And then they settled for what I believe were very reasonable salary adjustments to be able to make the schools work and the budgets work. So this being my last year, I'm very proud of that. And the teacher's contract has been settled, as well as the support staff contract for the next 3 years. So I would answer any questions anybody might have.
Mr. Chairman?
It looks like Don stepped off just for a moment. Paul, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Rob, for the detailed presentation of the budget. And I know this is your last year as you are retiring. It's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and we wish you nothing but the best. And I hope you're going to stay in Rockport. And again, thank you for being such a good champion of our young people. It's important and expensive to run public education. I mean, you see these numbers and the mandates that the Commonwealth have put to local school districts is real, and it doesn't have a lot of help with it either. So I think it's important to realize it's the obligation of this town and its citizens that vote here and live here to provide an equal education for all our school age kids. And I think the budget was straightforward. I'm sure there'll be tweaks to it due to other factors that come into it, but thank you for your presentation. And just one question, enrollment, how, I don't know if this might not be the time to talk about the enrollment, but how concerned are you with the enrollment? And can you give us just a quick little synopsis of where we stand in terms of enrollment in the Rockport Public Schools presently?
I think the best answer is, Paul, it's not soaring upward. Obviously, there are less resident students in town, and the school choice program has not increased in the last couple of years. It's probably leveled off, so that overall enrollment is eroding some, and there needs to be some changes in how one can attract school age families to town.
Right.
And that necessarily isn't a school issue, but it certainly is a major town issue. But the enrollment has not gone to the level that we would be cutting large amounts of staff or programs. You have to offer a comprehensive school program in a small community to be able to keep your own resident students and families staying in your schools.
Right.
So it is certainly an issue that needs to be addressed, needs to be talked about, but it's not to the point where that I feel you would be able to go through that and say, oh, you could cut 5, 6, 7 teachers, because it's not as simple of an exercise as doing that.
Right. And I think it's also important to point out that enrollment is down in many school districts across the Commonwealth. People aren't having large families, and then you combine that with the cost of real estate here in town, you can see where we're at.
Yeah, and the other problem we had, especially last year, Paul, not quite so much this year, is that a lot of people, because of the pandemic, were not comfortable having their children come into the school building.
Right.
So we had a dramatic increase in those that chose to homeschool their children.
Right.
And a lot of them have come back, but it's a hard thing to, grab a solid number, and you certainly can't count those ones that chose to homeschool and say, well, look at that, there's 15 gone. Well,
Right.
yes, that's the correct answer, but you also can't then say, well, 15, look at that rise in 15. I think
Right.
you have to justify that change. And the pandemic has made the whole sort of view of budget lines and school open, school closed, substitutes, PPE, state and federal ESSER funds flowing in. It's you have to clear that fog away and try to look at your base operation and look at that skeleton and look through what's there. You have to have your AP programs, you have to have your advanced programs, you're mandated to have your special education programs, and that's no different whether you have 680 kids or 750 or 620 across a K-12 school operation. You still have to maintain that comprehensive program.
Right.
And
One last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I know that a number of students left Rockport when we were closed during the pandemic and went to private schools because they were in session. Did many of those students come back this year?
I haven't done an analysis of that, Paul. I believe
Okay.
a lot of them did come back.
Oh, okay, good.
I can't tell you those numbers. I could get those figures, but
I was just curious and hoping that would increase the enrollment as well with having those students return. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. If I may, I'm going to echo Paul's opening comments. To have somebody like Rob Lebo as our superintendent was a blessing to this town. Rob has been not only a good steward with the funds that he's been given to operate his school, but I don't know if I've ever seen somebody who cares more about these kids than Rob. And I know the biggest thing that Rob is going to miss will be the kids. It's not going to be budget meetings. It's not going to be any of the other stuff. It's going to be the kids. And I just want to thank you publicly, Rob, for the years you've given to this town and the improvements and the things that you've done to make Rockport and our school a better place. So thank you. And I know we haven't heard the last of you, but thank you very much.
I'll beat my horn on my school bus when I go by.
I like that. I like that. That's great.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready to move back into the PowerPoint. All right. Public Works, Department 400. So the general fund portion of the Public Works budget is reflective of an approximately 8.76% increase over the FY22 amount. And a lot of that is due to more accurately reflecting the needs of the department and the town. Like IT, DPW is one of those departments that is behind the scenes and is involved in a lot of different things, not only for projects they're responsible for. The new director, Gary LeBlanc, and Aaron Shalufo, the new assistant director, and the office and business manager, Lori Greenslade, undertook a pretty complex project in the last couple of months to basically take what existed for the DPW budget, which was hundreds of lines, and consolidate that down into more realistic, more workable budget lines. We had, as an example, we had lines for one line for nails, one line for nuts and bolts, one line for hammers, one line for other power tools. That's just not reflective of how the department functions anymore. And quite frankly, that caused a significant accounting headache. It meant, a couple dozen transfers almost weekly for the office manager just to pay some bills. Some budget lines would have $17.20 and others would have 15,000 in them. There was no real rhyme or reason, and it had slowly crept to that point over a number of years. Gary and Aaron and Lori really dug in with the partnership of Carrie and Debbie Gillis in our accounting office to bring some clarity to those budget lines and make sure that they were appropriately reflective of the department needs, that they were more specific yet clear enough and broad enough to address the actual needs of the department. And in addition to that, once they were appropriately reestablished, there are some lines that have not seen adjustments or increases in areas that really should have over the last few years. And knowing that we needed to, there were increases that were reflected in our fuel costs and our power and light costs and other general areas, as well as simply realizing that some lines were just painfully underfunded. Our garage lines, our highway lines, our public properties lines, all areas that are important to general functioning. So thanks to DPW for going through and putting those in much better shape. So as you work through the specific line items, you'll see that those have changed and are reflective of that. Any questions on DPW? Okay. Next one, entering the 500s, health and welfare, 510 Board of Health, 541 COA, and 543 Veteran Services. No changes, showing no changes on those over the current fiscal year. Any questions on these lines? Okay. 610 Public Library is reflective of an approximately $18,000 increase over the current fiscal year. 630 the Recreation shows approximately $1,000 decrease over the current fiscal year, and there is no change to Granite Pier and the funding associated with that. I see Cindy Grove and Dana Mastroianni, our director and our assistant director respectively, as well as all of the trustees. Cindy and Dana, is there anything you'd like to say relating to the budget that is proposed here?
I would. Thank you so much. First off, I want to thank you for hosting tonight's meeting and offering it in a virtual format so that so many residents can attend. I have to admit that the librarian in me immediately wants to jump into promoting all the incredible virtual programs we offer and the services we provide, including homebound delivery and our new library of things that include things like technology converters, like transforming your VHS into digital formats, sewing machines, soil testers, and here I go. So we'll stop. But I welcome you all to please visit our library's website to see all the amazing things that we offer. And if there's something that you would like to see the library offer, please let us know because we are your library. That being said, libraries have faced and adapted to the dramatic changing needs of the community, which we always have, from papyrus scrolls to ebooks to whatever the future is going to hold. Public libraries will be there, and we will support the educational and recreational needs of the community while protecting their rights for confidentiality and intellectual freedom. We currently buy books. When you think of a book coming out, it's not just a book. It's a book in print. It's a book in large print. It's a book in an audiobook, a playway, braille, ebook, audiobook. And with changing times and the speed at which the pandemic has forced us to change, we find ourselves stretched as thin as ever. Programs we now offer have bounced between in person and through Zoom, and our patrons have been so gracious in the flexibility and how we can offer our services. And thanks to a townwide survey that we did last year, we now know that moving forward, the community really wants the choice. So once we are able, we will offer hybrid programs with the support of the IS&T department, which I think, again, the trustees, and I wish to thank them, the DPW, the town administration, and Carrie, who I think should be nominated for sainthood for all of their support provided to us to meet and exceed community expectations constantly throughout this pandemic. So to address the FY23 budget specifically, I just want to say that the increases that we have requested are all contractual or really critical to library services. So there's nothing that we're asking for that's above and beyond or anything that we don't consider mandatory at this point, but I welcome any questions.
Any questions for Cindy?
I was going to make a motion to canonize Carrie as Cindy requested, but we'll hold that off for another meeting. But thank you, Cindy. You do a great job over there. And our town library is one of our greatest resources, as it is in any town. So thank you for your stewardship.
Thank you.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Please go right ahead, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Cindy, for all your hard work and the Board of Trustees, and that library is a real jewel in town. And my 93-year-old mother, I'm sure she's very happy that I'm announcing her age, but she reads about 3 or 4 books a week, and we're constantly going there. So just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and what a welcoming place that the Rockport Public Library is.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, we love your mother.
Yeah, she's something else.
She really is. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for the library? Sarah?
Yeah, just to echo what everyone else has said, and I want to commend Cindy and the trustees for being so flexible and during COVID. And I see you guys switching from in-person programming to online, and Lana's on social media constantly kind of explaining and, just giving the full explanation of everything. So great job. And I know that, a lot of residents really, really depend on the library as part of their daily life. You guys have just done a fantastic job keeping it going.
Stop video.
Thank you. That means a lot.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Moving forward, Thatcher Island is reflective of an approximately $3,000 increase. They are planning on increasing the number of trips that they take out to the island. In essence, increasing the capacity associated with getting out there. They already serve nearly 1,000, and I know they are working towards increasing that. So we've added at this point what we're able to accommodate for that increase in boat trips. There's no change on 639 Straight Smith Island, and no change for 692 the Memorial Day Parade. Also, I want to recognize for the first two the good partnership that the town has with the Thatcher Island Association, who in many cases really is the true funder for all the large scale things that happen on the islands. And we're able to have a budget this size for those islands because of the work of the association. Any questions on this page? Okay. The 900 accounts, Carrie, can you walk us through?
The 9/11 contributory retirement, that is a number that is dictated to us by Essex Regional. We have little control over that. Unemployment, I think that we do a very good job at trying to hire and keep. Most of our claims are individuals who have chosen to leave. And for the health insurance, that's, the really big wild card in the whole scenario. And we are holding a place at approximately 8.5%.
Any questions on the 900 account so far? Okay. 916 FICA Medicare, 917 sick leave buyback, and 940 liability insurance. No changes, excuse me, associated with the last two. Sick leave buyback, again, we have obligations through our collective bargaining agreements and our personnel regulations associated with the buyback of sick time for some employees. That is funded through this particular line. Liability insurance is what we're predicting level funding, but we won't know that until we get closer to the end of the fiscal year when they start the binding process. And then 916, Carrie, can you briefly touch on FICA?
Sure. Again, FICA is basically just a mathematical liability that we carry. It's 1.45% of all of our labor costs. So that's a number that just we have no control over. It gets plugged in based on what our total labor cost is.
Any questions on this slide? Okay. Community Preservation Operating Fund, carrying $30,100 for the operating account, and including an additional $120,000 for a debt transfer to cover the debt associated with CPC projects that transfers into the general fund from CPC for the treasurer to process payments associated with that debt. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Moving forward to the enterprise funds. Fund 60 is the water enterprise account, which shows an approximate 4.65% increase over fiscal 22. And the sewer enterprise shows an approximate 0.01% decrease fiscal 22. Aaron Shalufo, our assistant director, is on. Aaron, go ahead and accept the unmute. And can you just give us a quick overview of the what got us to water and sewer enterprise?
Sure. The water enterprise, the driver for the increase there is mostly in the past, we've had chemical increases. Chemical costs have gone up over the last few years, and it hasn't really been reflected in the budget, in my opinion, properly. And we've had to take from other line items to cover those costs. So this increase will cover those chemical cost needs, and also the material cost increase for purchasing of piping, water main supply, piping, and repair components.
Okay. Any questions on water or sewer overview for enterprises? Okay. Any questions? So that wraps up the operating expenses. Any questions on anything we've covered on operating before we move into capital and free cash? Okay. Again, as you work your way through reviewing Selectmen and FinCom, the materials, there will be, of course, another opportunity on Thursday again at a minimum, and then obviously we move into further review the week after. But again, first look tonight. Additional questions certainly on Thursday as we progress through that. So I'm going to pull down the PowerPoint for 1 second as we transition over to capital to just go over free cash usage. So the free cash usage has received the initial endorsement of the Capital Improvement Committee and last night of the Finance Committee. The free cash amounts are listed here as certified by the Department of Revenue: 2.2 million for the general fund, 317,000 for the water enterprises retained earnings, and 428,000 for sewer enterprises retained earnings. The finance director and I recommend the following uses for that free cash amount for the general fund listed here. $25,000 towards our COVID free cash amount. Again, that is our backstop for all of our COVID costs. We continue to utilize federal funds that make their way here through the local fiscal recovery fund, but not everything is reimbursable, not everything is eligible, yet the expenses still exist. So this adds a little bit more back into that pot for us. $200,000 to the master roadway improvements account. Again, that doesn't cover the projects themselves, but it does cover the work and the preparation to go into developing and permitting and designing those projects so that we don't stall out as we look for larger sums of money for these projects. That number is consistent with what we've done in previous fiscal years. $15,100 for the charity accounts, again, consistent with previous years. $75,000 to the assessor reval, again, consistent. General stabilization, $100,000, and capital stabilization, $175,000. Both of those are slightly reduced from previous years based on the actual balances in those accounts. We maintain very healthy balances in our general and our capital stabilization funds, thanks to the continued additions to those accounts. It is, however, important as part of our ongoing bond rating process and ensuring that we're staying on top of these things, that we continue to deposit into those funds. So we are making deposits just slightly less than what we have in previous years to accommodate for needs elsewhere. $250,000 to sped stabilization. That account in the past, we put about $200,000 in, but in conversations with the superintendent and in really actually looking at some of the intent with that, the eventual goal has always been and still is that we have enough in that account that for these unforeseen or these last minute changes to come out of that instead of impacting the operating budget. The last couple of years, it's been nearly a wash, not totally, but nearly a wash with what we're putting in and what does need to be withdrawn. So we're trying to put a little bit more in to try to start to build that fund up a bit more. $450 to the Conservation Trust Fund, which again is consistent with previous deposits. $100,000 to the OPEB Trust Fund. That is in addition to the $125,000 that we budget for annually in the operating fund. $50,000 towards snow and ice. We didn't need to use that, use free cash for that last year, but as I'm sure you've all seen, there's been a lot of DPW service, a lot of snow and ice operations, almost nightly in some cases, for sanding and salting operations. So we do expect we will need to utilize that funding. And then that leaves $1.2 million for capital requests. So again, CIPC did do an initial approval on those, as did Finance Committee last evening. And that is what we have utilized for the development of the capital improvement program to present to you this evening. So I will switch back to the PowerPoint. So for this process, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee has met a number of times. That committee is comprised of 2 members of the Selectmen, 2 members of the Finance Committee, myself, the Finance Director, and the Accountant. Selectmen representatives, Selectman Brackett and Selectman Lilia, and Finance Committee representatives Paul DeRozier and Don Southard. Department requests were reviewed and further follow-up was done. Any questions that came up were done. In addition to my interactions and my meetings with each of those departments, a couple of members took a few site visits to go look at some locations at the school and at the water treatment plant to get a better idea of what exactly some of the projects entail. And to that end, we have a Capital Improvement Committee has endorsed the following recommendations to move forward to the Selectmen and then to the Finance Committee. General fund borrowing. And just to comment on borrowing in general, we have held this stance for a number of years and continue to. Borrowing is a last resort. The intention is the usage of free cash for something like this. But as I said at the CIPC meeting, we sometimes find ourselves in a position where we can't let things wait any longer. We continue to hold off and hold off. Costs increase. Damage happens to facilities and to vehicles, and then it just becomes more expensive and causes a more significant issue. So to that end, realizing that we do need to take some action in some of these areas, you will see the items that are recommended for borrowing are being done based on the need that we do need to take some action in these areas. The general fund borrowing in the amount of $450,000 would cover town hall, annex, central fire and ambulance, door replacements, and either restoration of or replacement of windows in all of those buildings. So we are at a point where the town has continued to make great strides in energy reduction in different facilities with lighting upgrades. Before we spend any more money on these buildings to do something like that, we need doors that are properly sealed. We need windows that are not, allowing a breeze in, whether they're open or closed, windows that will actually stay up and function. So the intention is for particularly town hall and for central fire and ambulance, any windows that can be restored will be restored. Those that cannot will be replaced, all with, again, keeping in mind, and same for the annex, keeping in mind that we are in the historic district and those requirements do apply. Anything that can be restored will. And then the doors will be replaced. So the doors, using town hall as the example, are the inner doors are original to the building. So this allows us to properly replace these doors all the way back to the studs, totally new framing put in, and doors that can accept hardware associated with access control. So right now, all of you have come in and out of town hall a number of times. They're the original wooden doors. Those are not capable of accepting hardware associated with access control. They're leaky. They don't allow us to properly control the climate in the building. So the intention is that we will replace those. Same with the annex, upgrading the doors over there. Those are a tad bit newer, but still probably 30 years old. Central fire and ambulance, the doors and the frames are wooden. And I'm sure that Chief Keating can attest that in the summer, those doors swell up and it's harder to get in that way when you really do need to get in. So the goal will be that we'll address those and replace them with doors that will not have that issue, and that will also be ready to accept access control technology, which will be a benefit for all of us in these facilities. It will also eliminate the issue that we have on an ongoing basis of issuing keys. Sometimes they come back at the end, sometimes they don't, depending on the situation. Moving towards the access control option with key cards. When somebody is no longer associated with the town, your card is deactivated, end of story. The schools utilize access key cards, the police department does. They provide significant security benefits for us. We're also able to know who may be in or out in a particular location if there is a need to do that. A log could be checked to find that. But in order to do that, we need to have doors capable of accepting that, in addition to the other energy benefits that pull into that.
Rich, can I just add a quick comment, not to create more work for anyone, but considering that the old police station and the current fire department was built with WPA money in 1939 or so, I'm wondering if there are any type of grants that would be available as we upgrade that building.
That's certainly something that DPW will continue to keep an eye on, and hopefully should we get this grants and special projects manager, they'll also be able to turn their focus.
Yeah,
to
that'd be perfect job for them to do.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Any questions on this borrowing? Okay. Moving to free cash recommendations for the general fund. So I'll go down this list. $75,000 for the school auditorium lighting upgrade. I'll run through the list and ask some of the departments to opine further afterwards. $37,000 for fire rescue equipment, jaws of life replacement. $142,000 for fire turnout gear replacement. $278,000 for SCBA breathing apparatus replacement for the fire department. $175,000 for the annual IS&T capital program and ongoing technology needs. $20,000 for the harbor master and the North Basin gangway replacement. $24,000 for the behind the scenes work associated with streetlight conversion for LED. $124,000 for the replacement of 2 one-ton dump trucks for DPW. $164,000 for the 1/3 cost assigned to the general fund for the Vactor utilities truck purchase. $40,000 for the replacement of the building maintenance van for DPW. $52,000 for central fire and ambulance security upgrades, and $33,000 for phase one of library security upgrades. So going back with a bit more detail, the school auditorium lighting project, the capital committee reviewed that. That posed a safety hazard. I think Chief Keating, through his school facilities background, could probably just touch on that briefly, that the panel that's in place there has posed a fire hazard as it currently exists. Chief Keating, could you just touch on that briefly from your view from the facility side? Oh, hang on, just need to accept the unmute, Chief. There we go.
Which panel is this now that you're referring to? I'm sorry.
The auditorium lighting.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So that panel now is so overloaded. And it's become an issue now even to get the replacement breakers for them. So it is in desperate need of a replacement and an upgrade.
So this replaces and this addresses the safety hazard that's associated with that panel. The superintendent has previously touched on that as well. The next three for the fire department are for the replacement of gear and equipment. I want to recognize Chief Keating and the Board of Engineers for getting us caught up on these particular items. They are of prominent importance for us. I'll touch briefly on them, then ask the chief to give a bit more detail. The $37,000 is for Jaws of Life. Last year, the town replaced the Jaws on the squad, which covers the downtown area. This replaces the Jaws assigned to the Pigeon Cove station. Chief, can you talk a little bit about the necessity of having that second set here and the important role that this new version plays?
Yeah, so the second set of Jaws, we've had, in the past, we've had a couple of major accidents on Granite Street, which required two sets of Jaws. We had to reach out to the Gloucester Fire Department to assist us. And that is a time-sensitive matter. We had one gentleman that was pinned in a truck for a considerable amount of time. The Jaws that's going to be replacing are 37 years old. We could no longer get parts for them. And there is no actual trade-in value for it either.
Thank you. And the next two, the fire turnout gear replacement and the breathing apparatus replacement. This is what you see when you think of the firefighters. This is their gear associated with it. All of this gear, this may not be widely known, has expiration dates on it. And the gear does actually truly expire. So when the gear does expire, it's incumbent upon us, not only from a risk management and liability perspective, to make sure that we're not sending people into a hazard with gear that is deemed not safe, but also from a human and a moral perspective. We cannot in good conscience send people into a fire or an incident with gear that we know through safety organizations may not fully protect them. So Chief, do you want to talk a little bit about that and the grant that you're seeking as well?
Yeah, so the gear has a 10-year life expectancy on it. And so we're at that point now where we're probably going to come up on the 10 years on the breathing apparatus. And I believe it's going to be shortly after that, we're going to be coming up on the turnout gear. The tanks have to meet static requirements. The masks have to seal properly. What's happening now is all of these are starting to fail. It's costing a considerable amount of money to replace them one at a time. So this is the time we need to upgrade these. We have gone to apply for a grant for assistance firefighter grant from FEMA for $259,000 to try to offset this cost.
Any questions on the firefighter request, fire department request? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The $175,000 for the IS&T program, this is in some form or another has been an annual request. this is really the workhorse account for IS&T. This is where the life cycling of equipment comes out of. This is where new projects come out of, new software, new gear, hardware, software, all of the items that come up. I think Rob could certainly touch a little bit on the education side of the house, that especially with the pandemic, things are just coming up, and we need to find a way to continue to fund them, in addition to security issues that we need to address and ongoing life cycling needs. So this does cover us on an annual basis for that. Any questions on this request? Okay. Harbor Master request $20,000 for the North Basin Gangway. Funding has been in place, and we are under PO for the South Basin. This replaces the gangway associated with the North Basin. Any questions? Okay. $75,000 for the replacement of the elementary school gym floor. Rob, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, that's a wooden floor that has been sanded beyond its usable life. It's right down to the seams and the cracks in the boards, and we're told it can't be refinished again. So that's a removal of the wooden floor and replacement with another wooden floor. So it's pretty easy if you go and look at it. We had a couple of finance folks that came up and looked at it, and person who does the refinishing says that's the last time that it could have been sanded and refinished was last summer.
Questions on the gym floor? Okay.
I'm assuming that the time frame would be over the summer.
Yeah, we do it over the summer. Yep.
$24,000 for the streetlight conversion to LED. This is the second part of the behind the scenes work associated with the potential conversion to LED for the streetlights. This does not cover, or this is not funding for the actual replacement of the streetlights. It's the continued association work behind it. The next couple are DPW vehicles. So the DPW administration has, through this request process, been playing catch up. Our vehicle fleet has been severely diminished. We have put in tens of thousands of dollars into repairs to hold together some vehicles that are way past their useful life. We are at a point where several of them, despite significant amounts of funding being put into them, will not pass inspection again. They squeaked by with repairs and patching this time. They will not be in a position to pass inspection again. Some of these had, for one reason or another, fallen off of the request schedule over a number of years. The DPW administration worked hard to get the inventory updated, and we're working now to get those replaced. So the 2 one-ton dump trucks slated to be replaced. The 1-ton dump trucks are really the primary vehicle associated with DPW. They perform a variety of functions across the different divisions. The maintenance van, as well, assigned to building maintenance, has a number of issues associated with it. Chief among that is body rot, very, very significant body rot. So those are replacing 3 vehicles for DPW to try to get them back in a better place. We're not in a position where we can continue to wait on those. Should we not be able to replace them, we're going to most likely not be able to re-inspect them next time around, and then we're further down vehicles. The DPW Vector utilities truck. So I'm going to ask Aaron to speak on the specifics of that, but a third of the cost is set now for general fund, a third for water enterprise, and a third for sewer enterprise. We currently have a small, very small Vector trailer, which is wholly insufficient for the needs associated with a variety of issues for DPW. So this is an actual truck that is much larger in scale and actually meets the needs and allows us to do a great deal amount more work and bring some work back in-house for us. Aaron, could you talk about the value and the importance that the department sees in that vehicle?
Sure, thanks. This vehicle, or this vehicle and equipment associated with the vehicle, will allow us to do in-house stormwater catch basin cleaning, which is a required part of our permit for our MS4 permit for stormwater management. we should be able to do either somewhere around 1/3 to 1/2 of the town's catch basins per year and cycle through accordingly through the year and keep on top of that maintenance. In the past, again, I'm relatively new to the position, but based on my understanding, in the past, we've hired a company for about a week at a cost of approximately somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000. And we get about a week of cleaning. We do them as many basins as we can, but it doesn't meet our needs. And it's obviously a reoccurring cost that's only meeting a minor part of the cleaning needs. That's one aspect for would be for the highway division or the street division. The next aspect would be for the water division. Due to obviously subsurface conditions in Rockport, we sometimes have difficulty excavating and getting to breaks and managing groundwater. This vehicle would help us in dealing with that, especially when if you have any other utility conflicts. It would provide an easier way to excavate to that break and would be a way to also manage. It's not always easy to manage the groundwater in that trench when you're excavating. Thirdly, would be for our sewer department. We have not consistently cleaned our wet wells. We have 15 sewer pump stations, and we have not consistently cleaned those wet wells. This would allow us to be able to better manage the cleaning and maintenance of our wet wells, because we could do that in-house work through a team effort of the divisions.
So certainly something that is important. And as Aaron indicated, a bit overdue for us, a vehicle that has been a long time necessity. We did have a really detailed review last week about whether this vehicle will fit in the current facility. And the answer to that is yes. It will fit inside the current facility. It is a vehicle that should be kept inside because of storing some water on it. And it will fit. There'll be some minor modifications that the DPW staff in-house will make on the door that the trailer vac currently goes in, but it will fit inside the building without an issue. Questions on this vehicle? Okay. Central fire and ambulance security upgrades. So once, should the doors be replaced, the next step over there will be the addition of the access key cards for both sides of that building, an upgrade to the security cameras, the system that the fire department already has, and the installation of them on the ambulance side, all as part of our larger risk management strategy in town. And then for the library, the security upgrades, phase 1 is the addition of access control on the exterior doors and on the doors to the Brenner room and the trustees conference room. Phase 2 will be adding additional doors to that. But phase 1 is getting those areas that are used, particularly after hours, same type of thing. People are having to be given keys, which is not always conducive to what we need to be doing. This will make it where it can be remotely controlled and will issue cards and have a better idea of what's happening for the staff. So no cameras are factored in for the library. Cindy, do you want to touch on any of that?
Yes, just that we are in full support of this, and this will make both staffing issues and security much more secure for the library.
Any questions on the free cash projects?
Nope. I particularly like the security swipe cards. You know, you don't have to chase keys down anymore, and you also got a record of people coming and going. And in this day and age, it's a good thing. So, and all the items I support.
Great. And next is the parking meter fund, a drawdown of $110,000 for the replacement, annual replacement of a police cruiser and the replacement of a special services vehicle, the police pickup truck. Chief, anything you want to touch on with those?
So thank you, Mitch. So the first vehicle, we replace one cruiser a year. This is our annual replacement. It's going to be a hybrid SUV vehicle consistent with what we purchased last year. It'll be replacing a non-hybrid vehicle. And the special services pickup truck is also going to be a hybrid vehicle, replacing a non-hybrid 2012 Chevy pickup truck that everybody's probably seen around town. We use that thing for everything, transporting signage and barricades, transporting officers, towing the speed notification trailer, closing off intersections, as well as additional patrol support during inclement weather. So that truck's 10 years old. It's running into some maintenance issues currently, so we're looking to move that on. And yeah, those are the two vehicles, and both will get a lot of use, obviously. So thank you.
Questions on the?
Yeah, the pickup truck, can we send that down to DPW or the fire department? Is it workable?
So there are some issues with it. We can certainly look at, I can discuss it with Mitch, see if it's worthwhile putting some additional money into it. It is starting to get into that time frame, being 10 years old. It's probably got close to 56,000 miles, which isn't a lot of mileage, but those are tougher miles over 10 years. So if we can salvage it for at least a few years, that may not be a bad idea. And
maybe the school department or anyone in town. 56,000 is a low number, but you're right; those are tough. 56,000 miles, I'm sure.
Yeah, the challenging part is it's less about the miles versus the hours on the engine for a lot of these vehicles, but we'll certainly take a look at that.
Perfect.
Okay. Moving next into water enterprise, starting with the borrowing projects, $210,000 for the rapid sand filtration basin repairs and the valve upgrades, and $54,000 for the dissolved air flotation rapid mixer motors, the drive motors and the valves associated with that. Some members of CIPC took a tour of that facility on Friday to look specifically at those. When we start to look at some of the behind the scenes things, you don't often think about what happens when you turn your faucet on in these cases. But it is time that we take a look at what happens behind the scenes here. And these are two upgrades that are important to happen. So Aaron, can you give us a brief overview of those?
So the sedimentation basin repairs, which is part of the rapid sand filtration portion of the treatment plant, it's a big concrete structure. The majority of it is located outside of the existing building. It has got some major spalling on the concrete, and then the valves internal to that sedimentation basin are not functioning properly. So both of those are in need. We've had this on the books for a number of years. If my memory serves correct, it goes all the way back to 2014. So it's really, the time is now and needed. And then the dissolved air flotation rapid mix motorized drives and valves, that is just part of that the DAF or the DAF, dissolved air flotation, is a mechanical system, and it's going to need repairs and upgrades on a I'm going to say it's going to be around every 10 years, and we're reaching that point for that. They've made some repairs to the existing equipment themselves, but they're concerned that those repairs are not going to last.
Any questions on the borrowing items for water enterprise? Okay. Water free cash, $20,000 for water treatment plant security upgrades. So that facility, again, is in a unique spot. It is behind the police station, which is generally overall a secure monitored area, but the building itself does need to have some security upgrades with the addition of access control and the addition of security cameras as part of our larger risk management strategy. That is, again, a sensitive area that is drinking water control, and we need to be very cognizant of the security surrounding that facility. $108,000 transfer into the water treatment master capital account. Again, this is a fairly annual item. The amount varies, but this is the account that basically keeps the plant going in the interim between town meetings. If something comes up or something breaks, this is what keeps it going so that we don't recognize any delays in service. $25,000 is supplemental funding for the dissolved air flotation PLC control system. The system in place now utilizes 1997 technology. Aaron, do you want to address that item? And then Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Sure. The PLC controls is part of the SCADA system, which controls all of our functions through the water treatment plant. I know that Monty has worked with our division to do some SCADA upgrades, but the PLC is programmable logical control. That's what it stands for. This is the last component that needs to be replaced. There was some previous funding appropriated in a previous town meeting, but unfortunately the costs have increased, and we do need this supplement to meet those changes. I think I got it.
Okay. Tom?
Hey, thanks, Nick. I have a question regarding the philosophy behind using borrowing versus free cash. The previous slide, you talked, we're borrowing some money. So are there no sources of free cash to fund the previous slide?
Correct. There is not enough to go through and do that. And then when we make the assessment on borrowing, we look at what has a longer useful life. There are useful life considerations that we do need to take in for borrowing decisions. And some of these have a longer useful life, which is what led us to make the recommendations associated with that. Again, we'd rather not in most cases. We get bumped up against, sometimes we just need to do it. And in this case, those had useful lives that fit better with borrowing than some of these other projects.
And just a quick follow-up, is there a threshold for useful life that you typically look at?
So I would defer to Carrie on that, but usually some of these other items, useful life of, the 5-ish year mark is typically not something that is we deem really worth borrowing unless it's urgent. We try to go for the 10+ year useful life items. So Carrie, do you want to add anything to that?
You've basically hit the nail on the head. And some items we can actually even go beyond useful life if they are really something that warrants doing a selectman's override on the useful life.
And when you look at, again, what's on this current list, the security upgrades, access cards and cameras, some of those have shorter useful lives. Cameras go, key card systems go. So, as an example, that's what we assess it somewhat case by case, but we look for the longer borrowing.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Moving over to sewer enterprise borrowing. The recommendation is for $1 million for inflow and infiltration elimination. So this is an item that I would say for at least the next several years, you'll continue to see some more significant requests coming. So previously $800,000 was approved for borrowing for this to address a very specific sub area of the sanitary sewer system. This addresses a couple of items that I'll ask Aaron to walk us through. And then Aaron, after you walk through generally what the project is, if you could please address the expectations and the requirements that the town is under with DEP associated with this.
So this request would handle basically what we call sub area 4 and 4A for infiltration and inflow removal. Overall, we feel that we have we're looking at a price of about 1.8 million. So we may be looking to have supplemental funds. We have talked again, if Mitch, if I'm saying this improperly, let me know. We are also looking at potentially using some of the ARPA funds. If I'm incorrect, let me know, to meet these requirements. And the reason we need to meet the requirements is that we have an existing ACO, administrative consent order with the DEP, to reduce our infiltration and inflow. We have done, like Mitch said, we had done one project recently, and then I think back in 2016, another project was done. We recently re-metered all these sewers and tried to see what the benefits were. The areas that we have done the I&I removal in are showing that type of promise. They are lower, significantly lower than they were before. So the highest area of focus that when we did the metering was 4 and 4A for infiltration and inflow. So that obviously that's going to be the next area that we want to focus on.
Any questions relating to this borrowing? And again, I'll just point out, this is not by any means a final request. So this is something that will be ongoing as we work our way through and meeting the requirements that are imposed upon us. Sewer free cash, $55,000 for the wastewater treatment plant security upgrades. Again, this is access control and security cameras. In this current fiscal year, we will address physical access to the facility. DPW and IT will be moving forward with an access control gate to monitor that facility. Again, like water treatment, that facility does contain sensitive chemicals. So we do need to always be aware of our physical environment. The final third of the Vector Utilities truck, $72,000 going into the master capital account that has the same purpose as the water master capital. $50,000 for the upgrades to the pump stations at Marmion Way and Long Beach, and $87,000 for the pump station upgrades at Dock Square. Aaron, can you touch on those upgrades for those facilities, please?
Sure. I'm going to start at the bottom, work my way up. Dock Square, that's a 4-pump system. That's our main pump station. All the flows in the town of Rockport go to Dock Square and then get pumped to the wastewater treatment plant from there. We currently need to rebuild 1 pump. And so basically we have 4 pumps. I'm sorry, let me restate that. We have 4 pumps. Currently 1 pump is down. We don't, that pump is a spare. We consistently use 3 pumps. We need to replace one of those pumps. And then what we're going to do is utilize the existing pump for a rebuild, so that not only are we looking to have the 4 pumps functioning, but we'll take that pump out, rebuild it kind of internally to have a spare. And the reason I say that is the other problem is with supplying the supply chain is getting pumps now can take up to 6 months to deliver. So we don't want to be in a place where our main pump station, if we had a major emergency, we were down more than 1 pump. So we're looking to have a kind of an added peace of mind at that station. Next one is Marmion Way in Long Beach. That one is going to be replacing pumps and controls. Both of those are at the time where they need to be upgraded. And those controls are outdated at this point and need some attention.
Any questions on sewer free cash? Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to thank Aaron, because I know, Mitch, we put you on the spot all the time, but the amount of information he has spit back to us in the last 40 minutes is really impressive. So thanks. And Aaron, I know that you're new to the job, so thanks so much for being so helpful and informative.
I was thinking the exact same thing. To talk about the learning curve, that was
I know.
pretty impressive.
I know.
We're fortunate that Aaron's, a large part of his background is in water and wastewater treatment. It's something he oversaw in his previous town and has strong background in. That's something that we've not had at the director level before, so it's a welcome addition.
Wow, super helpful. Thanks so much.
It's evident.
So that concludes the review of the initial review of the operating budget and the capital budgets. So we've covered just about $40 million in approximately 2.5 hours. So I appreciate your indulgence as we've worked our way through, but I think time well spent for everybody here to have us have the, really dig into some of this and in preparation for the further steps associated with the budget process. So thank you to the selectmen, to the department heads who are here, and thank you to the finance committee and everyone else present this evening. Happy to take any closing questions associated with tonight's review, and then I'm happy to chat on what our plan will be for Thursday.
Mitch, I'm good with what we've seen so far. I'll leave it to everybody else, but I do see we have our new superintendent, incoming superintendent on this meeting. And I'd just like to extend to him a very warm welcome to Rockport, and looking forward to seeing him navigate through this process. He's got some pretty big shoes to fill. Those shoes are probably boat shoes, if I know Rob very well. But we're looking for big things. So welcome to Rockport.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts for tonight's initial review and presentation? I'm going to just make sure I have everybody unmuted. Paul?
Yeah, just again, heads up and a thumbs up to the department heads, and particularly Mitch Fiero. I've been on the Board of Selectmen for about 12 years, I think now, and the process has become so much streamlined and consistent over the years. So we went through $40 million in 2.5 hours, as the town administrator correctly pointed out. So thank you for everyone's efforts, and this is the beginning process, and look forward to Thursday hearing the public's reaction as well.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Herm.
Okay, I've not said anything during the course of the evening because I think I've been overwhelmed by what is going on around me. It's very impressive. You do a fine job, Mitch, and all of the other presenters are excellent. They have their background, their knowledge is what we need to justify the costs, the expenses that are to be presented to the town. It's unfortunate in one sense of the word that the town can't take advantage of this entire presentation. I think they would have a much stronger level of support for anything that the town tries to do each year to keep the town abreast of the times. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from Selectmen or FinCom? Oh, okay. So what I would ask both boards to please do at your leisure over the next day or so, please digest what came tonight, review the materials that have been processed. The next opportunity for questions from both boards will obviously be on Thursday at the public hearing. The intention will be we will give a modified presentation that we've done tonight. Take any further questions from Selectmen and Finance Committee, an additional round after you've had some time to contemplate this evening's review and the materials in front of you. And then we'll move to questions, comments from the general public. And then at the end of that, the Selectmen will have their opportunity to deliberate and consider their approval and or any modifications to finalize their budget request to then vote to transmit to the Finance Committee. That transmittal will physically take place on Monday. Carrie and I will take the time between Thursday and Monday to get everything cleaned up, get everything ready. And then it will move to the next stage with the Finance Committee, who will again be meeting next week. Dwight, any thoughts on your end, or Don, any thoughts on your end as we wrap up tonight and get ready to move into Thursday?
We look forward to a productive Thursday.
Dwight, go ahead, Dwight.
On behalf of the Finance Committee, we look forward to a productive session on Thursday. I think tonight's review was extremely thorough. I'm sure that there will be many questions on Thursday, both from members and from the public. And I think the whole process is effective and the town should get a clear view of how this budget was put together and its purpose and what needs to be done.
And Thursday, 6 PM, correct?
5 PM.
5
5 PM. Okay, thank you.
And I'll close with just a general thank you to all town departments. We're in very tough budgetary times and it's everybody's worked together to really bring a good pared down as much as it can be budget while not sacrificing services to the people in town. Our emergency services, our DPW, our folks in town hall who don't get enough credit. They are the people that keep this town going. So thank you, especially to Carrie, who really there's nothing she doesn't know about this town when it comes to a financial standpoint. So thank you, Carrie, for what you do, and to you, Mitch, as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes tonight's review. If Finance Committee and then Selectmen wish to adjourn.
Okay, are there any before we adjourn, are there any further questions from FinCom or the Select? Nope, hearing none. We will start. Dwight, I'll defer to you first to close your meeting out, if you will, by a roll call vote of your members.
Yeah, let's give it just a second here. All right, do we have, I think we need a motion. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
I'm seconded.
All right, Tom,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Sal,
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Don,
Aye.
Maureen. Don't hear Maureen. I vote aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you for being here. It's all FinCom. Thank you so much. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Selectmen.
So moved.
Seconded.
The motion's made and seconded. Just because I don't see him and I don't want to exclude him, is Ross off of the call? I believe he is, correct?
He is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moved and seconded for the discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote. Selectwoman Wilkinson,
Aye.
Selectman Murphy,
Aye.
Selectman Lilia,
Aye.
Selectman Campbell votes aye. Our motion is adjourned, folks. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing everybody on Thursday night. Thank you for everything.